Hi, thank you so much for signing up for the Gutsy Guide to Navigating Imposter Syndrome. The fact that you have shown up and that you are watching says a lot about your readiness and willingness to make change, your willingness to let go of self-doubt. And I hope that this presentation will help you. I wanted to just quickly show myself on camera because I won't be on camera for most of it, but this is me. I am Becky, and I will get to introducing myself in a second, but mostly I just wanted to say thank you for being here, and I hope you learn a lot. So let's dig in. I am Becky. I'm a mindset coach, and I'm the person behind the brand, The Gutsy Boss. My pronouns are she or her. I live in St. Louis, Missouri, in the middle of the U.S. I am committed to smashing patriarchy, and I do that by helping women unlearn their own patriarchal conditioning and create their own definition of success. I'm committed to creating inclusive and safe spaces for women, femmes, and thems. I am a whole person who also happens to be a wife and mom, and I'm a Golden Girls fanatic. So if you love those broads, then we will definitely be friends. And if you don't, we can still be friends. I know you're not here to learn about me though, so let's dig into the content. This session will be for you if self-doubt regularly keeps you from going after what you want, personally or professionally. And if your attempts to solve the problem, and you'll see the quotes there, because I don't actually think it's a problem to solve, but your attempts to stop letting imposter syndrome hold you back have not worked. And if discussions about patriarchy don't make you uncomfortable, and if you're like one woman who reached out to me and said, what do you mean by patriarchy? You're not quite sure. Let me give you a quick definition. Patriarchy is a system in which rich, white, straight, cisgender, able-bodied men hold the power. And then it's all of the socio-political mechanisms that help maintain that dynamic. And there are a lot of those, and we learn them early, get conditioned into them from our very beginnings, and sometimes we aren't even able to separate them from our experience. We don't realize it's patriarchal conditioning that's at work. And that's the work I do, is help people unlearn a lot of that conditioning. And if you live in the US, or if you live in pretty much anywhere in the world, then you are living in a patriarchal country and culture and society. And so that is a big part of what we're going to talk about today. If it turns you off, totally okay. I'm not going to be the right coach for you, and this is not the right session for you. But if you're still paying attention and you're still into this, then let me also quickly give you a definition of what I mean by imposter syndrome. For a lot of us, we kind of have heard the term and we think we know what it means, but just to be clear, it was coined in 1978, actually called imposter phenomenon at the time, which is a much better term, by psychologists Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes. And they did a study of high-achieving women, probably women like you. And what they found was that most of them grapple with self-doubt that persists despite evidence to the contrary. So even if you have a record behind you of, great grades, wonderful jobs, lots of feedback from people that says you're wonderful, none of that will matter. And you still think of yourself as a fraud, that you still have self-doubt. You have a doubt about your abilities. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Imposter syndrome affects 70% of people. At least that is what many studies have found. There are a lot of varying stats out there. But what I can say is that in my own experience, 100% of the women, femmes, and thems that I work with experience this phenomenon. Who does it least affect? It least affects white, cis, straight, able-bodied men. And it most affects women, particularly women of color, and especially Black women, and the LGBTQIA community are most likely to experience this. And this is where, in the past, my session would have shifted into, let's fix this problem. And that is what, if you have done much work around imposter syndrome, have experienced other coaches, is most likely what you've experienced as well. That generally there's a few little stats, a little couple definitions, and then we get right into, now here's how to stop this problem that you have. And that is what I used to do until everyone started sending me this article. And if you haven't read it, it's great. You can go find it in the Harvard Business Review. It finally put words to what I had been feeling for a long time and what I had been privately saying with my own clients and with my communities for years. But I hadn't changed my own public language about imposter syndrome, probably due, ironically, to my own imposter syndrome, in that who was I to go against what most coaches are saying, right? Who am I? You know that feeling of self-doubt. But no more, because here's the deal. The feelings of being an imposter are real. But why you feel that way isn't, at least not entirely, a you problem that you need to fix. These feelings are a symptom of living in patriarchy. I mean, let's go back to just considering who feels it. And I think this is for two primary reasons. First, patriarchy conditions us to doubt ourselves. And by us, I mean those who benefit the least from patriarchy. So those who are the furthest removed from being a white, straight, cis, able-bodied man. So the less you benefit from patriarchy, the more you are made to question yourself. And two, you can't be what you can't see. And in white patriarchy, if you're not a white man, then you will have far fewer examples of what success can look like. So let's go into each of these a bit more. And first talk about doubting ourselves. Now, this is not a feminist studies course, and I won't dive super deep here into all of what we could talk about with patriarchal conditioning. But I do want you to know that this is real because I think it's important in unlearning it and to stepping out of the narrative that we're all given that this is a problem that we are responsible for and we need to fix. So I'm going to just go kind of quickly through some high-level stuff that will illustrate this point a little more clearly. And you can always do more research on your own if you're intrigued. First, patriarchy makes us learn to doubt our own bodies and our worth. Capitalism benefits greatly from self-doubt. There are a lot of rich people, and let's face it, mostly white men, who keep getting richer by conditioning us to doubt our inherent worth and our beauty. If we don't fit the mold, we aren't enough. Feeling like you're never enough is a quick path to self-doubt and self-loathing. And to this point, words matter. Just consider some of the ways that women and men are described differently for the same behavior. When women want money, we're selfish and greedy and ungrateful, not ambitious, not go-getters. When we want respect, we're called pushy, bossy, nags. Men are bold, women are feisty. Men get upset, women are hysterical. Men are stressed, women are hormonal. Men get passionate, women are emotional. Men are perfectionists, women are high maintenance. Also, patriarchy gaslights and blames the victim. To avoid triggering anyone who's watching this with some of the really upsetting statistics out there that illustrate how different life is for men and women, for white folks and black and brown folks, for straight cis people and LGBTQ folks, I will leave this to a few things that we've all probably heard, but I will just say that we are taught that the bad things that are done to us are our fault, and that causes us to doubt our own experiences, reactions, and feelings. Even psychologists and researchers blame women for imposter syndrome by saying they have less confidence than men. Although this has been debunked by many studies that have since proven that women are not inherently less confident. In fact, men are overconfident. They rate their abilities higher than what their performance would actually warrant. That's why that lean in model of practicing power poses and banishing your, upspeak vocal habits and eliminating negative thoughts, that's why none of that changes these disparities. Because it's not about us getting more confident. It's about men being conditioned to believe that they should be more confident than what their performance actually warrants. And this is why women get less credit. They are judged more harshly. Moms are perceived as being less competent. Why women aren't getting the raises despite asking for them. And why they are not being treated with respect when it comes to their professional acumen. I think we can all remember this little gem that came out in the 2020 presidential election that completely dismissed Dr. Jill Biden's education and experience. And this was not the exception. This happens a lot. And let's move into the second point I want to talk about with patriarchal conditioning, which is that there is a clear lack of role models for non-white, straight, able-bodied men. You can't be what you can't see. Obviously, can't is a strong word. You can, but it's exceedingly difficult to be what you can't see. And if you don't have role models, then of course you will doubt your own ability to do something. Why would you believe that you could be the CEO of a Fortune 100 company if there aren't examples that show you it's possible? So this includes getting rich. For every dollar owned by an unmarried man, an unmarried woman owns just 32 cents. That's a far greater disparity even than what the statistics we hear around wage gaps. Just look at the difference between Sue Bird and LeBron James and how this will affect certain women over their lifetimes. Obviously, professional athletes, it might be a higher gap, but even for most women, by the end of an average working woman's life, the wealth gap will cost her $1 million. It's costing Sue Bird a lot more. But just for the average woman, we're talking $1 million over a lifetime. And mind you, when we talk about average woman, typically we're talking about white women, which is clearly not fair and not average. And so let me say that if you are a Black or brown woman, then that is an even bigger gap. It will be even more than $1 million. And lack of representation is rampant. 45 out of 46 US presidents look eerily alike. And here's the 2021 Congress, where women represent 24% of the members of Congress. Now, mind you, we're more than 50% of the population. So half of our actual representation in Congress. And women of color represent less than 9% of Congress. And when it comes to the wealthiest humans, 10 of the wealthiest humans, all of the top 10, are white men. And the fortunes of the 10 wealthiest women add up to less than that of just the 3 richest guys. When we talk about these things, we hear a lot of good news about how there's more women that are becoming CEOs. And yes, that's true. The number of female CEOs is increasing, but it is still only 37 out of the top 500. That's less than 8%. Growth is great, but this is not a number to be excited about. 70% of college presidents are men, despite the fact that more women than men earn degrees. And most of what I've shared here is only illustrating the gap between men and women. And again, when we talk about men and women in a white patriarchy, we are generally talking about white men and white women. Things get much worse when you are looking at racial disparities and biases against LGBTQIA folks and anyone with differing abilities. So know that all the numbers you're seeing here are even worse as we move farther away from whiteness and maleness. Straight white men are conditioned to believe they can do almost anything, and they see plenty of examples that bear this out. And when they don't feel confident, then they are simply trained to recognize that lack of confidence as a normal reaction. Non-white men, on the other hand, are conditioned to doubt themselves and their abilities, and the male-heavy landscape then bears out those doubts. And when they don't feel confident, they are trained to believe it is a syndrome. In other words, something that is wrong with them. A sickness. But the truth is you're normal. Feeling doubt is normal. Even more, given the messages that you've received over your lifetime, how would you not feel doubt? Of course you do. Too much of coaching and self-help is gaslighting you too. That's because it's also based in patriarchal conditioning, even well-meaning women coaches that are telling you to push through or to fake it till you make it. It's teaching you to keep gaslighting yourself, to believe there's something wrong with you and not the system. The goal is not to pretend that these realities don't exist. It's about acknowledging them, realizing you're normal, and that forces outside of you are making you feel this way. And then we learn how to coexist with this reality in a way that's healthy. And that is not by faking it or pushing through. While I'm sure not much of what I've shared here is news to you, I wonder if seeing it all presented here this clearly pisses you off. And if so, I want to encourage you to think about how that anger might help you create change for yourself. Obviously, none of us is going to be able to immediately dismantle patriarchy, not in our lifetimes. But how can you change how you interact with and within it? For many of my clients, coming to an understanding of the reasons that they feel this quote unquote imposter syndrome, all of the things that are outside of their control that are being forced upon them, it creates righteous anger. Unlike blind anger, which is undirected and unproductive, righteous anger can serve as fuel for making change. Righteous anger is when we are angry at an unjust system, and this is certainly that. The truth is, change is far more likely to come from anger than from shame. Trying to stop feeling like a fraud from that place of should or I wish or it would be nice is way less powerful than doing it from a place of they want me to doubt myself, to not like myself, so they can keep me from succeeding. They want me to fail because it benefits them. Fuck that. I'm not letting them have their way. Use your righteous anger as jet fuel for no longer letting doubt hold you back. But I also recognize that for a lot of us, we're not there yet. You may not be at that place yet to be able to just say, screw you, I'm opting out. That takes time. And that's the work I like to do with people. But I also recognize it doesn't happen overnight. It can't. This is a lifetime of conditioning. We don't just opt out of it while the forces around us are still putting it upon us in a day. So let's talk about some other tools that can be helpful. Another tool that might be helpful for dealing with this phenomenon of self-doubt is to externalize the voice of your inner bully. Patriarchy has conditioned you to internalize it, to make you believe that you are the one who's unworthy and that you should doubt yourself. But in fact, it's all of the messaging that's created those feelings, and it's that messaging that you're hearing, not your true voice. So doing an exercise to actually personify that critical voice can help you remember that it's not you talking when it pipes up. So who does your inner critic sound like? That voice that tells you you're not good enough, that everyone's going to realize you don't know what you're doing, that you're going to fail. Who is that voice? Now, avoid the temptation of making it your mom, or after hearing all of this, even maybe making it the man, although that may work. But I find it's often best to choose someone from popular culture, maybe a book or a movie. It could be Miranda from The Devil Wears Prada, Regina George from Mean Girls. It can also be a guy. Let's face it, a lot of times that voice is a critical man. But mine's Kathy Griffin, who used to do the red carpet for E! The goal of this exercise isn't to personify the voice so that you can yell at it and hate it. My goal is actually to find empathy for that voice, which is why I think it can be helpful to choose someone like a character from popular culture that isn't real and who hasn't actually hurt you. Because it's hard to find empathy sometimes for those kinds of people, including the man or mom. It's easier to find empathy sometimes for a fictional character or someone you don't know well. So, for example, my voice, Kathy Griffin, I think of her as that kind of person who stands on the red carpet judging others. Well, who does she think she is to wear that? I can't believe she showed up in that dress. Oh, she looks awful in that. And I know that voice. Mine tends to pipe up in that way. But I also know what it's like to feel that compulsion to put others down to try to lift myself up. It's not something I'm proud of. It's not something I engage in anymore, at least not very often and not out loud. But I know that part of me. I know that part that feels so ugly, so alone, so bad about herself that she has to put others down just in some attempt to try to make herself feel better about herself. And when I can see that part of that person to say, I understand why you can do that. Even if I don't like the behavior, I think it's ugly, I also can understand where it's coming from. And I can see your hurt. I can see the hurt that made that happen. That is where we find empathy and compassion. And that compassionate approach actually allows us to coexist with the voice rather than resisting it, fighting it, being angry with it. I can say when she pipes up, oh, there's Kathy again. Oh, there she goes judging me to make herself feel better. Oh, how hard it must be to have to do that. How bad she must feel about herself. I ache for her. I'm sorry you feel that way. And I know this may sound a little woo and out there, but I swear, in my experience and that of many of my clients, it can be incredibly helpful. It takes us away from that place of resisting our own internal voice, fighting with the voices in our head, allowing them to make us feel bad, to now putting us in a place where we can say, I see you. That's hard, but I'll be okay. It shifts the dynamic. And ultimately, I think it feeds right into what I want to talk about next, which is the most useful strategy, I think, for dealing with self-doubt is to stop fighting it and learn to embrace it. And this is different than how most people learn to deal with imposter syndrome. What are the most common responses that we learn? Well, one, we learn to berate the voice in ourselves. This is stupid. I shouldn't feel this way. I know what's wrong with me. Why can't I stop feeling this way? I hate it. I'm stupid. But that kind of self-talk of beating it up, saying, stop it, you're bad, that's only making things worse. It confirms what the voice says. So it only adds to the voice's volume. It now says, you agree with me. I am stupid. Okay. The other thing we do is we try to ignore it and push through. I think this may be the most common advice that's out there. And it can work for a while. It does work. It works to push through our fears, to push through the doubts. But it doesn't work over the long term. This is what results in one step forward, one step back that keeps people feeling stuck, that keeps you in the cycle of saying, well, I did it before. Why do I feel this way again? Haven't I already dealt with this? Why is it back? I did this once. Why do I keep having it come up? What's wrong with me? The voice never went away. And actually, in our ignoring of it, it just gets louder. So each time it speaks up, it becomes even more crippling because we've ignored it. And the last thing we try to do is we try to reason with this voice. And this is also very common in coaching. You list out all the reasons that your doubt is wrong. We try to convince ourselves that we're not frauds. We listen to our friends who do the same thing for us, telling us we're amazing. And again, this is kind of like that ignoring it. It can work for a while. Sometimes that feel good stuff, the good vibes, positive light and love, it can create a temporary solution that allows us to get through that bout of doubt. But the voice always returns, and logic doesn't always work. Thinking differently doesn't always change the way we feel. And this is why people will say, well, I logically know this isn't true, but why do I feel this way? So what does work? Dropping those resistance techniques and learning to coexist with your doubt, maybe even befriend it, that's what I think works. And to do that, you need to learn radical self-compassion. And I teach that using a method I call see, hear, and love. See it means recognizing that voice for what it is. It's the part of you that has received patriarchal conditioning and is feeling afraid. It's nothing more than that. It's not you. It's everything external that has been internalized. Hear it means giving that part of you space to speak up, listening to what it has to say and feeling whatever comes up. Hearing it without judgment. Just being curious about what it's feeling. What does that part of you want you to know? And love it means validating the fears and feelings and committing to taking action that will keep that part of you safe. I know you're afraid to do this thing, and I want to do it. So here's how I can do it in a way that keeps you safe, that keeps me feeling safe. Safety is key because that part of you is afraid and isn't feeling safe.
There's obviously so much more to all of this than I can talk about in this short presentation. But if this approach is appealing to you because you've tried working with other coaches, listening to other gurus, reading the books, seeking therapy, all sorts of things that just haven't been quite right, and this approach is something that sounds like it might be the right fit for you, then let's talk. I would love the opportunity to have a free 15-minute conversation with you about whether Gutsy Boss coaching might be a good fit for you. And don't worry, on this call, I will not pressure you. My promise to you is that I won't apply pressure. I won't apply guilt. I'm not going to make you feel bad if you don't take action, and I'm not going to force you to make a decision on our call. It's just an opportunity for me to talk a little more about what I do, ask some questions about where you're at, and answer any questions that you have for me and about this program. If that sounds good and your intuition is telling you that this approach and I, as a coach, might be the right fit for you, then book that free call and let's talk. No pressure. We'll just see if we're a good fit.
Thanks again for watching this presentation. I am so hopeful that it has left you feeling fired up to make change. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought. The term imposter syndrome is used to turn patriarchal systemic issues into personal failings. It wants you to believe that you could do, have, be more if you just believed in yourself. Patriarchy wants and needs you to believe that self-doubt is a mindset issue and not a systemic issue. But the truth is, you don't need to be fixed. Imposter syndrome is not your problem that you need to solve. It's another tool that's meant to keep you exactly where you are, to keep you from taking wealth and power from those who have it. The good news is you can liberate yourself from this self-doubt. The good news is you can liberate yourself from imposter syndrome. You can see, hear, and love yourself into a new way of existing with your self-doubt. Liberation is exhausting, but you don't have to go it alone. I hope you'll join me. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a friend. And I hope you're singing the theme song now.